All right, welcome. We're going to get into Daniel 5 in this video. Daniel 5, as we continue in the book of Daniel, let me make, first of all, some preliminary remarks on Daniel 5, some kind of background or stage setting remarks. First, in Daniel 5, we're going to continue to see a theme, major theme, that is throughout the entirety of the book of Daniel, and that is God's Yahweh's sovereignty. In and through God will raise kings up and put other kings down according to Yahweh's own divine prerogative. So look for that in Daniel chapter 5 here. We'll get to in a minute. The other thing here is Daniel 5 is a continuation of court contests, and we made some remarks about how Daniel's structured. There are 6 total of these contests between, on one hand, the Babylonian king and Babylonian wisdom on one hand, by the way, which fails miserably, versus Yahweh and Yahweh's people, Daniel and his cohorts, representing Yahweh's wisdom, which prevails in these court contests. So watch for that again. And then from a literary point of view, Daniel chapter 5 is a continuation. It's really a mirror of Daniel 4. So if you read Daniel 4 and 5 in tandem, so John's video last week, we see this theme of the arrogant Nebuchadnezzar, king, again, main king in the Neo-Babylonian period, who is arrogant, then humbled, repents, and is restored. So that theme is there. Mirror image of that, with a different twist, is Daniel 5. A new king, Belshazzar. Arrogant, does not repent, is humbled, and ultimately disposed. So watch for that as well. Okay, let's get right into the text. So Daniel 5 here. I'll make some remarks as we go through. King Belshazzar. King Belshazzar, by the way, the name King Belshazzar, the name simply refers to is the god B-E-L, Bel, and the god Bel protects the king. That's what the name means. Belshazzar, Bel protects the king. Well, Belshazzar gave a great banquet for 1,000 of his nobles, drank wine with them. While Belshazzar was drinking his wine, he gave orders to bring in the gold, silver goblets that Nebuchadnezzar, his father, had taken from the temple in Jerusalem, so that the king and his nobles, his wives and concubines, might drink from them. So they brought in the gold goblets that had been taken from the temple of God in Jerusalem. The kings and the nobles, his wives and his concubines, drank from them. Verse 4, as they drank the wine, they praised the gods of gold, silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone. Okay, we'll stop there. A few remarks. Chapter 4 and chapter 5, they occur at different periods in the Neo-Babylonian period. Nebuchadnezzar in chapter 5 is long dead. He's gone. There's a new king by the name of Nabonidus. It's really, he's really the dad of Belteshazzar. So the king here who's in place is really what we might call a co-regent. Nabonidus, who is the king of Babylon, in this kind of weird way has left the Babylon, the city of Babylon, and has moved south in an area called Tema, which is present or modern day Saudi Arabia. And Nabonidus is a worshiper of the cult god sin, S-I-N. No relation to the word in English, sin. But Babylon itself proper, they are patrons of the god Marduk and Bel, B-E-L, not sin. So it makes sense that the main king of Babylon at this period leaves entirely the Babylonian city there. He leaves Babylon proper and then goes down south to the city of the god Sin. In his place, in his stead, is Belshazzar. It's Nabonidus' son, and that's who's left on the throne in Babylon. They're drinking, they're having a party here, and these kinds of parties really didn't occur unless there were military victories. So usually after a deposing of or a conquering of another nation, the king, his generals, his council would come together and they would party, have a great big party. This is odd because this occurs in the ending, really in 539 BC. This is the end, the waning of the entire Babylonian kingdom. And it's very odd that Belshazzar is throwing a party, much less a party of victory, because what's really happening at this point in history is the Medo-Persian king, Darius, is on the cusp of invading Babylon. So it's this very weird that this party is even going on. But the author of this text wants us to focus in on the sacrilege that's going on. The king, Belteshazzar, he gives orders. Not only is he not preparing the city for battle, he's partying. And he's doing this in a very blasphemous way. He's ordered that the goblets used in the holy temple, Solomon's temple, which has now been destroyed since then, he's taking these instruments and vessels that were used in Yahweh worship, and he is, with his cohorts, drinking to the gods and defiling these goblets, these vessels. Look at the response, verse 5. Suddenly the fingers of a hand, human hand, appeared and wrote on the plaster of the wall near the lampstand in the royal palace. The king watched the hand as it wrote. Verse 6. Make sure you catch this. His face turned pale. He was so frightened that his legs became weak and his knees were knocking. Now, our English translations have this kind of picture from top to bottom. The face turns pale, heart is frightened, and his legs become weak and his knees are knocking. This would have been a humorous picture in the days of Daniel. They would have read this, and it's a comical, but it's very, very a stinging portrayal of a king. The king who begins in arrogance, the king of Babylon, who is drinking from these vessels, has now been reduced to the comic figure of face being pale, so frightened. And in the original language, some scholars have pointed out that the idea of knees knocking together, legs becoming weak, that's really a euphemism, a nice way of putting it, that he's basically, without putting too fine a point on it, he's basically wetting himself. He's peed himself in fear. Verse 7, the king summons the enchanters, astrologers, diviners, the wise men of Babylon, and he says, anyone who reads this writing, tell me what it means, and I will, and they will be cloaked or clothed in purple and gold, All the kings, and we're familiar with this pattern, by the way, all the king's wise men come in, they can't read it or interpret it. Most believe, by the way, that they were able to read it. Mina, tekal, parson. They were able to read it, they just didn't know what it meant. Verse 10, the queen comes in, probably the queen mother, and she tells King Belshazzar, don't be afraid. There is someone in the kingdom that is known to interpret dreams. Verse 12, Daniel, whom the king, called Belteshazzar, found to have a keen mind and knowledge and understanding. He had the ability to interpret dreams, explain riddles, solve difficult problems. So he calls in Daniel. Verse 13, Daniel is brought before the king. King, of course, says, I hear you're the guy, basically my interpretation. You're the guy that can interpret these dreams. Verse 16, I've heard that you have the ability. You have the ability to give interpretations to solve problems. If you can, read the writing, tell me what it means, and you will be clothed in purple. Gold neck or gold chain placed around your neck. You will be the third highest ruler in the kingdom, which means the real king, who is in Tamah, Belteshazzar's dad, Nabonidus, the main king, Belteshazzar, second co-regent, and then here, Daniel, third in command. Here's Daniel's reply to the king. Keep your gifts for yourself, give your rewards to someone else. Nevertheless, I will read the writing for the king. And here's the interpretation. Your Majesty, the Most High God, gave your father Nebuchadnezzar sovereignty, greatness, and glory and splendor. This is the stinging rebuke here. Because of the high position he gave him, all the nations and the people, every language, dreaded and feared him. Those the king wanted to put to death, he put to death. Those he wanted to spare, he spared, etc. Okay. Verse 20 and 21 talks about chapter 4, how Nebuchadnezzar, became arrogant and now was humbled. Look at the contrast now, 22. Verse 22, but you, unlike Nebuchadnezzar in chapter 4, Belteshazzar, his son, you have not humbled yourself, though you knew all of this. Instead, you've set yourself up against the Lord of heaven. You have had the goblets from the temple brought to you, you and your nobles, your wives, your concubines. He drank the wine. Verse 24, conclusion. Therefore, the hand that he sent wrote the inscription. Verse 25. This is Aramaic, but I'll give you the Hebrew interpretation as well. Mine, tekel parsin. Aramaic. In Hebrew, very similar, it would read mina shekal parsin. The interpretation there is a mina and a shekel and a half. Here's what the words mean. Mina, God has numbered your reign and brought it to an end. That's what mina means. Verse 27. Tekal, Aramaic. Hebrew, shekel. That's what we get the word shekel. You have been weighed on scales and found wanting. Paris, your kingdom is divided. Parsin, by the way, is the plural. Divided. Your kingdom's been divided to the Medes and the Persians. Verse 30, conclude. That very night, Belteshazzar, king of the Babylonians, he was slain, and Darius the Mede took over the kingdom at the age of 62. Okay, here are some points as I wrap this up here. I think this is a teaching or a discipleship point. Think of the vessels of God that we have been given. spiritual gifts, perhaps our time, our bodies. These are maybe positions in the Christian community. And we have an opportunity to serve the Lord with those, or serve our egos. And we see Belteshazzar not serving the Lord. This is a cautionary tale here that we should be aware of. We might even ask the question here, am I using God's grace, God's gifts, God's time to build my kingdom, the ego, or his? Another point here. Notice this, verse 18 through 22. Daniel reminds Belteshazzar here what happened to his predecessor, Nebuchadnezzar. And the contrast here is Nebuchadnezzar did this. He repented. And you've not humbled your heart, and you knew all of this. I think this is an excellent discipleship point here, in the sense that we might know something and choose to ignore it, right? And I think for me the application here is we need to remember, constantly be vigilant and remember and apply lessons, and not just know things, right? But also, again, apply them. And then the final point I want to make here has to do with the kavod, the weight. This is interesting, and this will be, again, how we should understand the writing on the wall. By the way, the writing on the wall has entered into English, where we still use phrases like, it's language basically of the economy. That's what mene tekel parsin means, is it's economic language. It's count, or counting and counting, weighing, and divided. And we use that today where we might say something like, your number has come up, right? Or your days are numbered, right? Those have ominous overtones to them, and that's where they come from, right? The culture in that day, the idea was for shekel, and tekel, Aramaic, is weighing. And in that day, to weigh something, the idea was if it was found light, that means absence of substance, it was considered worthless, right? Think of a statue that has weight, it's full of substance. And the idea here is that the kavod, the glory of God, is full of substance. And when it applies, it's weighty, if that makes any sense. King Belteshazzar is found to be weightless. He's found to have no weight. Words in English that we might use that captures this is he's found hollow or shallow, or he has no substance. That's really what's being conveyed there. And so it's the idea, you've been weighed on the balances or scales of God's justice. You've been found with no substance, and therefore you have been divided, cut off. For us today, I think we might strive for maybe spiritual weight, having substance, integrity, and depth. In contrast to Belteshazzar, height, status, but no substance and very shallow. Okay, I've gone on long enough. Thank you so much. See you next time.